Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Technology, a podcast exploring the latest in computers, networking, home automation, mobile computing, and all things technology related. Our hosts will take a deeper dive into the latest and greatest in tech trends and give you the information you need to enable your tech-centric world.
This is Insights into Technology, Episode 9, Microsoft 362, and a look at industry-specific frameworks. I am your host, Joseph Whalen, and this is your tech news for the week. Microsoft did experience an outage with their Microsoft 365 service. This article comes to us from Bleeping Computer. They tell us Microsoft had to grapple with a widespread Microsoft 365 outage, impacting core services like Exchange Online, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint Online, and others, leaving users unable to access tools critical for business operations. The outage, which began on Monday, has also affected connectivity to OneDrive, Outlook, and Microsoft Defender for Office 365. The issue stemmed from a change that led to an influx of retry requests overwhelming server capacity, causing service disruptions. Microsoft has deployed a patch, restarted systems, and reported progress with 90% of affected environments recovering as of Tuesday. However, lingering issues persist, including delayed mail delivery and limited Outlook web functionality. This incident follows a pattern of disruptions, including a major Microsoft 365 outage in July caused by a DDoS attack, raising concerns about system resilience and the reliability of critical cloud infrastructure. Now, I have to say that this one, I don't want to say it hit home for me, but it was one that piqued my attention because my company recently moved over to several services in the cloud with Office 365. We did see some slowdown on the website of things. Fortunately, our email was not disrupted from this, but it brings up the concerns about the implications for business continuity with everyone migrating to the cloud now. These cloud services are becoming more and more favorable targets for attackers. That wasn't the case here. In this case here, this was a mess that Microsoft made them. So they basically DDoSed themselves with this update that they came out with. But it also kind of makes everyone look at their dependency on cloud services at this point. Cloud was supposed to provide us with the resources and the reliable services that you don't tend to get with on-prem solutions all the time unless you have a significant amount of resources, both in the form of hardware and expertise to handle it. The other thing this highlights is a transparency issue with communication. Microsoft's updates through the outage were detailed, but fell short of providing any kind of definitive timelines for recovery. And when your systems are down and your business is non-functional, you need to have some kind of game plan moving forward. Enterprises that rely on the cloud, uncertainty in resolution timeframes becomes a very sketchy thing to have to deal with. We also have to take a look at the financial and productivity costs of prolonged outages. This isn't just a matter of not getting email. This particular outage lasted for more than 24 hours. It results in operational inefficiencies. A lot of people tend to look at these and they just look at, okay, well, we were down for these 4 hours, 5 hours here. What did we miss? And really what it is, it's not just that, but that compounds on itself because you have to make up for what you missed, but you have to make up for that during normal business hours where you're supposed to be doing normal business. So it has a significant, more long-term impact on businesses. Businesses in critical sectors with tight service level agreements might face penalties or damages to client relationships. If you're guaranteeing service or response times to your customers that you can't fulfill because one of your vendors is obviously causing a disruption, that complicates the situation even more. Now, the question begs itself, what preventative measures can you take? What resiliency strategies are there out there? Microsoft attributed the root cause to a change that overwhelmed their servers as part of a technical mishap. But this also highlights the need for having robust testing protocols in place. And not just for Microsoft, but for organizations that rely on these services, you need to have some type of fallback plan. Perhaps a third channel of communication to your customers to notify them of these outages. Some type of automated response plan that you can have, updating your website so the customers can come to your website and see. It requires you to have a much more flexible strategy in place to handle these types of things in ways that you don't normally communicate with because your communications are compromised. Overall, the broader cybersecurity and infrastructure context we have to look at here, we have to look at past incidents. In July, they had a DDoS attack that caused a similar problem. That was an outside attack. Now they're making internal changes, and those changes themselves are taking the system down. I mean, I've discontinued relationships with vendors who have become disruptive like this in the past. And as big as Microsoft is, if Microsoft becomes a liability for my business, I have to find an alternative. That's just kind of the price of doing business. So we'll see how people respond to this. I'm curious if anyone else out there was impacted by this. I'd love to hear what the impact was and what you did to deal with it or resolve it. There's not a lot you can do, but what was your path to solution? Our next article comes to us from Bleeping Computer, one of our popular sources that we have here, obviously. Windows Update is blocked on PCs that have Assassin's Creed or Star Wars Outlaws. So this is another incident where a lack of testing on Microsoft's part has caused problems. Microsoft has temporarily blocked the Windows 11 24H2 update on systems running Ubisoft games such as Assassin's Creed titles, Star Wars Outlaws, and Avatar's Frontiers of Pandora. This comes after reports of crashes, freezes, and audio glitches following the update's release. Users voiced frustrations on forums like Reddit and Microsoft's Feedback Hub, highlighting issues that range from sudden game crashes to black screens during gameplay. Ubisoft has acknowledged the problem and released a temporary hotfix for Star Wars Outlaws, while working on permanent fixes for other affected games. In the meantime, Microsoft advises gamers not to manually install the update and has paused its rollout for impacted systems. Both companies are investigating, aiming to resolve the compatibility issues quickly. So, again, the impact, this obviously is a not necessarily a commercial or enterprise-related computing issue here because it deals with gaming. However, it does highlight the complexities involved with compatibility when you've got very complex operating systems, applications, and programs on the computer. It highlights the complexities of keeping them updated and doing so in a way that they're all compatible with each other. We do software development, some software development at my company, and testing is always the most challenging thing. And I come from and one of the biggest difficulties of testing is regression testing. Regression testing requires a lot of time, a lot of resources, and most organizations don't invest the time or the resources to go through regression testing, or at least not as frequently or as aggressively as they should. But without, regression testing, and even if you do have a comprehensive regression test facility in place, the combinations of, or possible combinations of, application interaction is astronomical at this point in time. There's no way to possibly have all these applications tested across the board for these types of updates. Even in a closed system like Apple, in which the software is curated, the hardware is known, the software itself, the operating system is known. Even Apple runs into situations in which they have compatibility issues. It's just a matter of understanding the limitations that we have in a highly complicated environment right now. You have to do updates. Cybersecurity itself kind of warrants that. So many of our applications and operating systems out there that don't get patched are the first ones to get breached. But there has to be a balance. There has to be a balance between security, feature updates, and system stability. Microsoft got burned on this one here. I think a lot of the problem that we run into with Microsoft these days when they're doing their feature set updates in Windows is we're getting a lot of stuff in the operating system we probably don't really need. And because it's core level functionality, you don't have the ability to uninstall or disable it. Like under no circumstances do 95 or more % of the population need a Linux subsystem in their Windows environment. There's a very small percentage of people who do. And with that in mind, they should be able to install those themselves if they opt for it. Everyone shouldn't get something like that. And I don't want to pick on the Linux subsystem. It's just that one's blatantly obvious. You can say the same thing about Office. There's no reason that I should be able to put computer code into my Office document or my Excel file or something like that. It's just that's not what it's designed to do. And Microsoft products tend to very quickly and very consistently bloat up with all of this. I don't want to say it's useless. I'm sure it's useful to someone. But for the vast majority of people, it's functions and properties that are going to go unused. I think Microsoft needs to be a little bit more diligent in what features they're putting in. And I think what they need to do is put them in as optional whenever possible. Don't force these things. And we're talking about last couple episodes of the podcast about the Microsoft recall. I don't know who asked for that. I don't know who's going to use that or why you would use it. But Microsoft is forcing it down our throat. And I think when they do stuff like that, they make the software and the operating system more complicated, more cumbersome, and more prone to interactive issues with other applications. And I think this is a clear case of that. So we will see if Microsoft gets this sorted out. I'm sure they will in time. If not, I'm sure Ubisoft will probably be patching these things. The last thing they want is to have Microsoft impacting their bottom line. Our next article comes to us from InfoSecurity Magazine. They tell us that the state of New York received a fairly large insurance payout. New York State has reached an $11.3 million settlement with two major car insurance companies, Geico and Travelers, following data breaches that compromised sensitive information of over 120,000 residents. The breaches, attributed to poor cybersecurity practices, exposed driver's license numbers, and led to fraudulent unemployment claims during the COVID-19 pandemic. Investigations by the New York Attorney General and the Department of Financial Services, DFS, found the companies failed to comply with required cybersecurity regulations, including implementing robust controls to protect consumer data. As part of the settlement, Geico will pay $9.7 million and Travelers $1.55 million in penalties, while both companies have agreed to strengthen their cybersecurity measures. This includes developing comprehensive information security programs, improving authentication protocols, and enhancing threat detection and response capabilities. The breaches highlight critical lapses, such as Geico's failure to protect its quoting tools from repeated attacks and Travelers' lack of multi-factor authentication on its agent portal, leaving thousands of residents' data vulnerable to exploitation. And this goes back to what we've been talking about with cybersecurity, is a lot of it is basic common sense. If you follow the basic rules laid out in frameworks and other procedures, you can dodge most of the bullets out there. Poor cybersecurity practices on critical industries have a significant exposure point. The Geico and Travelers breaches highlight how inadequate security measures in critical industries like insurance can lead to widespread fraud and identity theft. And this is what's kind of scary here. We saw this with the national data, where these companies are housing massive amounts of highly sensitive data. And they're not doing it securely. They're not doing it in a way that is standards-based, and they're exposing everyone's information. And while this may be an inconvenience to Geico and Travelers, an expensive inconvenience, although I suspect these fines are insignificant compared to their annual revenue, this could have life-changing implications for the victims of these data breaches. People having their identity stolen, having their credit histories destroyed, and it takes years and years and thousands of dollars to try to repair these things. And Geico and Travelers get a slap on the wrist. This money that they're paying here to New York State, not a penny of that's going to go back to any of the victims. What do the victims get? The proverbial year of credit monitoring? Yeah, and everyone knows it's only for a year. It's only credit monitoring. So how protective is that for people? All these malicious actors out there have to do are wait for that year to be up and then go out and start opening credit cards in people's names. It's something that needs to be taken far more seriously, and the penalties have to be far stricter. And I'm not saying we need to go the route of GDPR and the European standards. I think they're a bit draconian and ridiculous in the breadth and depth of penalties that they have. But if you're going to fine a company, $9 million, $10 million, that money needs to go to the victims. It shouldn't get pocketed by the government. So, but again, it's as simple as following cybersecurity frameworks. How you can be in business, in that kind of critical business, handling that kind of data, and not have some type of industry standard minimum security that you have to abide by and that you're audited on is astonishing to me. But I will say, fortunately, neither of those are my insurance companies, so that's not to say that it won't happen to me at some point in time with my insurance companies or someone else. I just hope that they have more precautions in place. I do, and I'm not a financial advisor, so take this with a grain of salt. But I would recommend, if you're not actively seeking a loan or a mortgage or a new car, that you go to at least two of the 3 credit bureaus, and put a freeze on your credit. That's really the only protection that you as a consumer can hope for at this point in time to try to arrest some of the damage. We're going to take a little break here, but before we do, I want to take a moment to invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio and video versions of all of our podcasts listed as Insights into Things. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon, any place you can get a podcast, really. I would also invite you to give us your feedback. Tell us how we're doing, what we can do better, what topics you'd like us to talk about, what topics you don't want us to talk about. You may get tired of listening to me drone on about cybersecurity, and just let me know. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can call in now and actually leave a voicemail for us. You can call into 856-403-8788. That's 856-403-8788. If you'd like us to get you on one of the shows, just say so on your voicemail. These are family-friendly shows. Please keep that in mind. We may edit your statements for subject matter and time constraints. Again, if you want to call in, that's 856-403-8788. And we'll be right back.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Technology. Next up is an article from the Register. They tell us that Palo Alto Networks firewalls are compromised after a critical security hole has been found. Thousands of Palo Alto Networks firewalls have been compromised as attackers exploit 2 critical security vulnerabilities in the devices, leading to backdoors, crypto miners, and other malware being installed. Initially, roughly 2,000 devices were affected, but this number was dropped to about 800 after the company released patches earlier this week. The vulnerabilities involve an authentication bypass and privilege escalation that can be chained together for remote code execution via the firewall's management interface. Threat actors reportedly increased exploitation dramatically after a proof of concept exploit went public. When Palo Alto Networks described the scope as, quote, limited, researchers from Wiz and Shadow Server revealed significant malicious activity, including sliver implants and web shells tied to a known command and control infrastructure. The attackers appear to have been leveraging these opportunistically for months. Organizations using affected firewalls are urged to apply patches immediately and monitor for signs of compromise, as the vulnerabilities represent a severe threat to network security. Well, I would say so. So, zero-day vulnerabilities and exploit chains. We'll eventually do a deep dive into this topic here, but it's worthwhile talking about the fact that most breaches today are not single point breaches. They're not a single exploit that's used. Most exploits today are chains of exploits. In this case, the two vulnerabilities, an authentication bypass and a privileged escalation, both represent a severe threat, but when chained together, they actually allow enabling of remote code execution. And a lot of times, the more severe breaches that you see in the news, it's sometimes 2 and 3, 4 and 5 exploits chained together. The other thing worth mentioning, or at least discussing, is the effect of the proof of concept in this case. Even though the flaws existed, they hadn't appeared in the wild until someone had produced this proof of concept, and then numerous people obviously jumped onto that. So it's very, very important how we handle a responsible disclosure when it comes to vulnerabilities. Releasing proof of concepts while also talking about what these exploits do is potentially very dangerous and very irresponsible. This also shows that crypto mining is still here to stay. It's not going away anywhere. And that's mainly because people are making money off of it. But there are mitigations that you can take to prevent or at least minimize the damage from crypto. One of the things that we have to keep in mind here also is the role of the vendor. How good are the communication? What are their practices for patching? Palo Alto Networks referred to the affected devices as limited, yet external researchers identified thousands of compromised systems. That lack of transparency tends to undermine any kind of trust you would have in this vendor. The companies need to evaluate how your company needs to evaluate how vendors can better communicate during a cybersecurity crisis to maintain that enterprise trust, to ensure effective incident management. I have to apologize. I'm still not 100% recovered from my cold, so my voice is a little rough still. Next up, we have a story from Security Week talking about Interpol taking down over 1,000 cybercrime suspects in Africa. Interpol's Operation Serengeti has marked a major crackdown on cybercrime across Africa, resulting in the arrests of 1,006 suspects and uncovering nearly $193 million in financial losses linked to ransomware, business email compromise, digital extortion, and scams. Conducted in partnership with Afripol, the National Police, and involving 19 African countries, the 2-month operation from September to October of 2024 identified 35,000 victims and represented a significant leap in enforcement efforts, as previous operations only led to 25 arrests over 2 years. High-profile cases included arrests in Kenya, over $8.6 million in online credit card fraud, and the dismantling of a $6 million Ponzi scheme in Senegal. The operation highlights a growing collaboration among local police, private sector partners, and international agencies to combat increasingly sophisticated cybercrime networks. Beyond traditional scams, emerging threats such as AI-driven malware and advanced attack techniques are also being addressed, underscoring the evolving nature of cybercrime. Interpol's efforts, despite limited funding compared to organizations like the FBI, reflect a significant step forward in global crime enforcement and capacity building within African nations. So I think the biggest takeaway on this one is the escalation of cyber threats. The operations focused on sophisticated cyber threats such as ransomware and business email compromise schemes suggest the rising complex cyber threats targeting businesses. This trend necessitates advanced threat detection and response strategies within organizations. There's obviously also significant financial implications for enterprises. With nearly $193 million in losses linked to the identified cases, the financial impact on businesses is profound. The situation highlights the critical importance of investing in comprehensive cybersecurity frameworks to mitigate potential financial damages. The role of international collaboration actually has to be talked a little bit about here. Most international interaction, we'll say, that we tend to talk about with cybersecurity has more to do with threat actors than it does with cybersecurity professionals or enforcement. But the joint efforts of Interpol and Afripol demonstrates the effectiveness of international cooperation in combating cybercrime. Such collaborations can lead to more coordinated responses and resource sharing, benefiting enterprises by reducing the prevalence of cyber threats. So hopefully we'll see more of this in the future because it obviously was highly effective. The last thing that's probably worth mentioning here is the value of proactive cybersecurity measures. This particular operation's success in identifying and apprehending cybercriminals highlights the necessity for businesses to implement these proactive cybersecurity measures. Regular security assessments, employee training, and the adoption of advanced security technologies are essential to protect against evolving cyber threats. I cannot stress training enough. The biggest source of risk to any business out there from a cybersecurity standpoint is your users. If they don't know what to do, if they don't know how to decipher malicious or fake emails, if they can be social engineered into giving out information or doing things that are dangerous, then they represent the biggest threat to your organization. And the only way to combat, I would say 90% of those threats is through training. Repeated training. I mean, I don't want to say beat it into them, but you kind of have to emphasize these techniques and the training over and over until it's second nature to people. And I know most employees of companies out there don't want to be bothered with cybersecurity because it's an inconvenience to them. Security and convenience are mutually exclusive. So a compromise has to be reached. And I think if people are more familiar with cybersecurity, more aware of the implications and the dangers and the necessity of it, they'll be a little bit more accepting of what they have to learn about it. Our last article today comes to us from TechCrunch. Russia-linked hackers exploited Firefox and Windows bug in widespread hacking campaign. Security researchers have uncovered a sophisticated hacking campaign by Romcom a Russia-linked cybercrime group exploiting 2 zero-day vulnerabilities in Firefox and Windows. These flaws enabled a zero-click exploit, allowing malware to be remotely planted on targets' devices without user interaction. The campaign primarily targeted individuals of organizations across Europe and North America, with Romcom leveraging malicious websites to install its backdoor and gain extensive access to victims' devices. Mozilla and Microsoft patched the vulnerabilities in October and November, respectively, following alerts from security researchers. Romcom, known for its ties to the Russian government and previous ransomware attacks, demonstrated advanced capabilities in crafting stealthy attacks. The group has a history of targeting entities allied with Ukraine and is believed to have affected up to 250 victims in this campaign. While the Tor browser, based on Firefox's codebase, was patched, no evidence suggests it was exploited. The campaign underscores the growing threat of government-linked cyber attacks and the critical need for timely vulnerability disclosures and patches. So, zero-day vulnerabilities and zero-click exploits. The exploitation of zero-day vulnerabilities in Firefox and Windows showcases how attackers are leveraging unpatched software flaws to deploy these zero-click exploits, which require no user interaction. Enterprises relying on Firefox or Windows systems are at risk of undetected malware deployments, which could compromise sensitive data or network integrity. Now, this is where your automation, your security automation tools come into play here. If you're not doing a deep packet inspection, if you're not doing active log evaluations, if you don't have network monitoring on all your nodes on your system to look for file encryption or unusual activity, even having honeypots in your organization to try to attract some of these advanced persistent threat actors. These are all tools that you need to be proactive. No organization out there has the manpower to actually do this stuff by hand anymore. And this is where I'm kind of hoping some of the AI tools will lean into for us. Rapid patch management. This is another case where if the patches go out fast enough, we might be able to prevent these 0 days from being used. But if we're rapidly patching these types of things, chances are they're not getting properly tested and could potentially themselves be a threat, as we saw with the earlier Microsoft article. So it's a fine balance of maintaining security and responsiveness. Collaboration between security firms and vendors is also an important aspect to take out of this. The involvement of ESET, Mozilla, Microsoft, and Google's Threat Analysis Group highlights the importance of collaboration in identifying and patching vulnerabilities. Certainly, these are all competitors to each other, but I think when it comes to cybersecurity and patching and defense against these malicious actors, we have no choice but to cooperate with each other, and it's kind of refreshing to see that they are in this case. So I think that's all we had for our news segment this week. We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some industry-specific cybersecurity frameworks. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of your favorite gaming podcast finishing with a play?
Oh, no!
Well, check out No Credits Rolled, where we play the games but rarely finish them. How's it going, folks? I'm Sam Whalen, your friendly host at No Credits Rolled, the ultimate gaming podcast, where we dish out the latest scoops and reviews on all your beloved video games.
Hey, listen!
Not only that, but we spice things up with some guest interviews and even give you, yes, you, a chance to have your say. Tune in every other week for a fresh dose of No Credits Rolled, available on all major podcast platforms, and hit us up on social media at No Credits Rolled. So why wait? Let's dive into the gaming world together, where finishing games is optional, but the fun is guaranteed.
Welcome back to Insights into Teens. We're going to continue our walk down cybersecurity framework lane here. So today we're going to talk about a couple of industry-specific frameworks out there in this part two. The first is going to be the PCI DSS framework, which governs cybersecurity in the payment card industry. And then we'll talk about HIPAA. Now, I know a lot of people out there associate HIPAA with health insurance, which it is. When most people think of HIPAA, though, they think of the array of documents that you have to sign every year, basically allowing people to see your records. However, there is quite an extensive cybersecurity framework associated with HIPAA as well, which is what we're going to talk about today. These illustrate two different philosophies towards cybersecurity, which is why I think it's worth talking about these together in this case here. So, PCI DSS is the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. It's a set of security guidelines established to protect credit card data, obviously. With the widespread use of credit card and debit cards for purchases, it's essential to safeguard cardholder information from unauthorized access, fraud, or data breaches. PCI DSS was developed by major credit card companies to provide a standard approach to securing cardholder data across various industries that process, store, or transmit this information. Compliance with PCI DSS is mandatory for businesses that handle credit card transactions, ensuring that customer data is protected and financial transactions are secure. At the core of PCI DSS are specific requirements that businesses must follow to achieve and maintain compliance. These requirements outline essential practices, such as establishing secure network systems, implementing strong access controls, and monitoring network activity to detect any unusual patterns. The scope of PCI compliance depends on the volume of transactions, business processes, with different levels of requirements for small businesses and large corporations. For example, a small retail shop may have fewer requirements than a major e-commerce platform, but both must follow PCI DSS to protect their customers' data. Protecting cardholder data involves several key techniques. One of the most critical is encryption, which transforms sensitive information into an unreadable format that can only be decoded with the correct key. Encryption ensures that even if data is intercepted, it cannot be used by unauthorized parties. Access control or other fundamental techniques, limiting data access only to individuals who need it for their role. This approach minimizes the risk of internal threats by restricting sensitive information to select groups of individuals within the organization. This method works together to create a robust barrier against data theft and fraud with other methods, helping businesses maintain trust with their customers. PCI DSS standard is updated periodically to address emerging security challenges. The latest version, PCI DSS version 4, introduces new guidelines and revisions that respond to modern threats and technological advancements. For example, version 4 emphasizes continuous monitoring and validation processes, encouraging businesses to proactively manage lost my slide. There we go. Sorry about that. 4 emphasizes continuous monitoring and validation processes, encouraging businesses to proactively manage and assess their security controls rather than relying solely on annual checks. These updates help businesses remain vigilant in a constantly evolving threat landscape where attackers are always seeking new ways to exploit vulnerabilities. Maintaining PCI DSS compliance requires ongoing effort, especially in the retail industry, where high transaction volumes and diverse payment methods can add complexity. Retailers must conduct regular audits to ensure they meet PCI requirements and address any potential gaps in their security measures. Compliance audits are thorough evaluations that check whether the business is following PCI standards, providing an opportunity to identify areas of improvement. By prioritizing compliance and taking a proactive approach to security, retailers can protect customer data and reduce the risk of costly data breaches. Now, PCI also has a number of standards that have to be met outside of the cybersecurity realm as well. It's a very comprehensive framework itself that governs the hardware that you're processing credit cards on, how you transmit that data, how you store that data, what data you can collect. There's a number of different things associated with PCI DSS. So if you're dealing with it from a cybersecurity standpoint, understanding all aspects of it really is a requirement. The next framework we're going to talk about is the HIPAA Health Security and Privacy. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, security and privacy rules are essential regulations designed to protect patient data, particularly as healthcare information becomes increasingly digital. These rules provide a framework to ensure that healthcare providers, insurers, and other related organizations handle patient information responsibly and securely. The goal is to safeguard protected health information, or PHI, which includes any personal data that could identify an individual from unauthorized access and misuse. Compliance with HIPAA is not optional for organizations that deal with patient data. It is required by law to protect the privacy of individuals and maintain trust in the healthcare system. The HIPAA security rule focuses on 3 types of safeguards to protect electronic PHI: technical, administrative, and physical. So again, it's a comprehensive framework that isn't just for cybersecurity, but it covers all facets of securing this information. Technical safeguards involve using technology to protect data, including encryption, secure access controls, and activity tracking. Administrative safeguards cover policies and procedures that manage how employees access and handle patient information, such as employee training programs and access authorization processes. Physical safeguards ensure that the locations where patient data is stored are secure, using measures like restricted areas, locked storage, and surveillance systems. Together, these safeguards form a comprehensive approach to securing patient data against a wide range of potential threats. In addition to the security rule, the HIPAA privacy rule grants patients the right to access and control their health information. This rule establishes that patients can review their medical records, request changes if they find inaccuracies, and decide how their information is shared. This transparency is important because it empowers patients to be active participants in their healthcare, while also holding healthcare providers accountable for maintaining accurate and accessible records. The privacy rule also sets guidelines on when and how healthcare providers can share patient data, balancing the need for patient privacy with necessary information sharing for medical care and public health purposes. Despite the framework provided by HIPAA, protecting healthcare data is a complex challenge. Healthcare organizations face the constant threat of cyber attacks, including data breaches that can expose sensitive patient information. These organizations also need to navigate the growing use of digital health records and mobile health technologies, which increase the risk of unauthorized access if not properly secured. Balancing data accessibility for healthcare professionals with strong protections against unauthorized access is an ongoing struggle for the industry. A case study on healthcare organizations' experience with HIPAA compliance breach can provide valuable insights into these changes. Examining a real-world incident helps illustrate the potential consequences of inadequate safeguards and the lessons learned from addressing a breach. Such cases underscore the importance of continuous employee training, and adherence to security protocols to prevent the future violations. By learning from past compliance breaches, healthcare organizations can strengthen their security measures and better protect patient data in an increasingly digital environment. So that's HIPAA and PCI in a nutshell. I think that's about where we're going to stop for today's deep dive. In our next episode, we'll take a look at the NIST cybersecurity frameworks, 853 and 800-171. I should know that one. That's the one that might have to be compliant with. So that's it for today. Before we do go anywhere, I want to take a moment to once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast. You can find us listed as insights into things pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast these days. I would also invite you to check us out on social media. You can find us on X or Twitter at twitter.com/insights_things. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. You can find us on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings. We do stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. Feel free